And a lot of us understand that when we, in any tradition, in any ritual tradition, when we recite the names of those we lost, it both has a special power, it brings them close, and it brings us healing. I want to tell you a little bit about my own losses to AIDS, and I want to say their names. My young colleague at Boston's Dance Umbrella, David Alexander. My Opera News editor, Bob Jacobson. My first serious ballet teacher, Christopher Flynn, who got very famous for mentoring Madonna. My beloved friend Nick Hoopus, who loved powerboats and got a ticket in his little red Mazda Miata the first time he took me out in his sports car. And we say the names of the people we lost from the dance world. There are too many to mention. We would be here all night. But let's begin. Alvin Ailey, Rudolf Nureyev, Arnie Zane, Christopher Gillis, Ulysses Dove, Robert Joffrey, Chu Sang-go, Michael Bennett. It's hard to believe how many were cut down in those years. It's painful to think about what they would have experienced, what they would have given us, how we would have experienced them as our elders now. It should have been that they would be privileged to experience their entire lifespans. Choreographer and dancer Sean Dorsey was a kid during those years. He didn't grow up at the ballet bar, but as a child in Vancouver, British Columbia, he says he danced around his family's living room to the music from Sesame Street and Fame. At that time, he was being raised as the female child of a lesbian mother. Growing up in an activist household, Dorsey thought he would engage in traditional activism. Then he realized that his deepest love was for dance and for movement and for storytelling. In his 20s, he began studying dance seriously. He also began to identify as transgender. The Missing Generation takes its audience back to a bitter time, but its focus is the present. For every loss, there was a radiating circle of mourners, the friends, lovers, family members, colleagues, health workers, children, allies, all of whom felt the loss of those people to AIDS as irreparable. Dorsey realized that while we often speak of those who survived the battlefield, or natural disasters, or even abuse, the costs and trauma to those who survived AIDS epidemic, as people who were positive or negative themselves, and those who were bystanders and took it all in from the wider circle, is a story that is rarely told. A longtime friend of mine, and a longtime friend of the Bates Dance Festival, Peter DeMuro, was one of the people who was interviewed as part of this project. He told Sean that the histories of LGBT people are not documented and shared in mainstream histories. We often don't learn about them in school, and they continue in many parts of our lives to be a source of shame or censorship. LGBT histories are not kept alive with the same mechanisms of the histories of many other minority cultures. But the AIDS crisis is American history as much as it is the history of the gay community, and it needs to be shared. So Dorsey went on a journey. Over the course of 2 years, he delved into archival research. He taped 75 hours of oral histories of survivors, sitting down for 2 and 3 hour interviews with people who had survived that time. He spent another 500 hours crafting the score that you're going to hear tonight. It's in 17 sections with themes pulled from those interviews, set to new musical compositions written by cellist Alex Kelly, multi-instrumentalist Jesse Olsen-Bay, trombonist and keyboard player Ben Kessler, and chant-based musician Jeffrey Alphonsus Mooney. The text you hear during the Missing Generation are excerpts from actual interviews. They are not recreations by actors. And the 4 dancers, Dorsey with longtime collaborators Brian Fisher, Arv John Jones, and Nal Simons, are all queer and all have their own connections to the communities in which the disaster unfolded. This is art that has very personal implications. The first demand that the Missing Generation makes on us, its audiences, I think, is to be open to the stories of the survivors, to remember them and to honor them, and ultimately to incorporate those stories into a broader narrative of what life was like in America in the second half of the 20th century. The second demand, I think, is even more urgent, and I especially want to make that in this room. Many of you are young enough to have only known HIV as a treatable chronic condition. That's good news. That's progress. People can live HIV positive for a long time, and the challenge is to expand the option of treatment to underserved populations across the globe, especially to those who are giving birth to children who may be HIV infected. But that doesn't mean any of us should be taking it for granted. AIDS can still kill. Dance and other works of art don't usually make practical demands, but this one does. Don't share needles and practice safe sex. And I'm not kidding. The gay and transgender people mourned in Sean Dorsey's The Missing Generation didn't know what was killing them, but we do. Stay safe. Do it for them. We all deserve it.